Clara Whitcomb stood with one mitten missing and a train ticket trembling in her hand, while the Christmas Eve crowd pretended not to see the widow everyone had forgotten. Her black dress was patched at both elbows. Snow melted through the cardboard soles of her boots. Behind her, the storekeeper had nailed a notice to the depot wall, claiming she owed more than her dead husband ever earned. She had come to leave quietly. Then Eli Mercer, the poorest rancher in the county, rode up on a mule with frost in his beard and shame in his eyes, and begged her for one chance. Before this frontier story unfolds, comment the country you're watching from. If you believe one kind cowboy can change a forgotten woman's life, subscribe so you do not miss the next romance. Clara Whitcomb had chosen Christmas Eve because she thought a town would be too busy with candles, pies, and church bells to watch one poor widow disappear. She was wrong. By 4 o'clock, nearly half of Mercy Crossing had gathered near the train depot, stomping snow from their boots and whispering into wool collars. The westbound train was late. That gave the town plenty of time to notice her small valise, her thin black coat, and the way she stood alone beneath the freight awning with nothing but a paper ticket tucked between two trembling fingers. The painful part was not the cold. It was the notice on the wall. Mr. Dobbins, owner of the general store, had nailed it there that morning with a hammer loud enough to bring folks from the barber shop and the livery stable. The paper read, "Debt owed by Mrs. Clara Whitcomb, widow of the late Henry Whitcomb. Goods taken on credit. Payment demanded before departure." There were numbers beneath it. Big numbers, cruel numbers, numbers Clara had never seen written in her husband's hand. Someone had drawn a little black coffin in the corner. Clara stared at that coffin until the shape blurred. She had spent 10 months after Henry's death trying to make herself useful enough to remain in Mercy Crossing. She washed linens for the hotel. She mended shirts for ranch hands who paid her in beans. She sat with sick children, scrubbed church floors, and sang hymns beside women who never invited her to supper. Still, when Christmas came, no one had asked where she would spend it. A gust pushed snow under the awning. Clara bent to tighten the twine around her valise. The handle had broken 2 weeks before, and the twine cut into her fingers. "Train agent says you paid cash," Mr. Dobbins called from the edge of the platform. He was a heavy man with a red scarf and a smile that never warmed his eyes. A peppermint stick clicked against his teeth. Clara did not answer. "That means you had money," he said louder. "Money enough to run, not money enough to settle honest accounts." The crowd quieted the way people did when they wanted to hear cruelty, but not be blamed for it. Clara kept her chin lifted. "I paid for that ticket with my wedding ring." A few women lowered their eyes. Most did not. Mr. Dobbins laughed softly. "Then your husband left you less than I thought." The words struck harder than the wind. Henry had not been a kind man, but he was dead, and death made people expect a widow to guard his name like a candle. Clara had guarded it. She had guarded every bruise beneath long sleeves, every unpaid bill he had hidden. Every night he came home smelling of cards and whiskey. She had buried his temper with him and let Mercy Crossing call him unfortunate. Now, they were calling her dishonest. The train whistle sounded far off, thin and lonely across the white prairie. Clara closed her eyes. One more hour and she would be gone. She had no plan beyond leaving. A cousin in Denver might take her in, if the address was still good, if the cousin remembered her, if Christmas had not made every stranger's door harder to knock upon. She had half a biscuit wrapped in cloth, 11 cents, and no wedding ring. The hoofbeats came slow. Not the shock proud rhythm of a rich man's horse, more like a tired animal picking careful steps through packed snow. Folks turned. Eli Mercer rode into town on a small brown mule with one ear bent sideways and a patchy blanket over its back. He was 30 or maybe older, lean from work and weather, with shoulders that looked used to carrying burdens no one thanked him for. His coat was patched at one sleeve. His hat brim sagged with snow. A feed sack was tied behind his saddle, almost empty. He had come for flour, salt, nails, and maybe a little coffee, if the price allowed. He saw the notice first, then he saw Clara. Something changed in his face, not pity. Clara knew pity. Pity looked down. Pity softened its mouth and moved away quickly. Eli Mercer looked ashamed, as if the town's silence belonged to him too. He dismounted near the depot steps. The mule snorted and shook snow from his ears. "Mrs. Whitcomb," he said. Clara knew him mostly by sight. A poor rancher northeast of town. Folks said his land was more rock than pasture. His fences leaned, and his little boy had stopped speaking after his mother died. Eli came to church only when weather was fair, sat in the back, and left before anyone could ask for a donation. "Mr. Mercer," she answered. The crowd watched with new interest. Nothing fairy, a winter afternoon, like another person's trouble. Eli looked at her valise, then at the train track. "You leaving?" "Yeah, yes, for good." "That is the purpose of leaving." A faint flush climbed his cheek, but he did not step back. "I heard about the widow arrangement." Clara stiffened. There it was, the shame beneath all the other shame. 3 weeks earlier, a rancher from Abilene had sent word through the church that he wanted a wife to help raise his 2 daughters. He would accept a widow of good character. Reverend Pike had asked Clara if she would consider it. She had prayed over it, cried over it, and finally said yes, not because she loved the man, but because a roof could sometimes look like mercy. Then the Abilene man came to town, saw Mr. Dobbin's ledger, heard whispers about Henry's debts, and left before supper. By morning, Mercy Crossing knew Clara Whitcomb had been rejected by a man desperate enough to ask for a wife by letter. Eli removed his hat. Snow silvered his dark hair. "I'm sorry." Clara's fingers tightened around the ticket. "You need not be. Everyone else has enjoyed it enough for all of you." A few men chuckled. Eli did not. The train whistle came again, closer now. He swallowed, and for one strange second, he looked more frightened than she felt. "I came to ask you not to go," he said. The depot seemed to hold its breath. Clara stared at him. "Why?" "My boy needs someone steady," Eli said, then winced as if he heard the ugliness of the words after they left him. "No, that ain't right. I mean," Mr. Dobbins laughed. "Mercer, are you shopping for a wife at the train platform now? You can't afford sugar. How will you afford a woman?" Eli's jaw worked. Clara felt heat crawl up her throat. The town had already watched one man reject her. Now another had come to ask for her as if she were a hired broom. She lifted the valise. "Excuse me." Eli stepped aside at once. That startled her more than if he had blocked her path. "I said, Peter," said Shun, he said, voice low. "I don't want to buy you. I don't want to use you. I don't have fine words, Mrs. Whitcomb, but I have a roof that does not leak over the kitchen, a child who needs kindness, and a life that has been too quiet since grief entered it. I am asking for one chance to prove you are not forgotten." The words fell awkwardly, but they did not feel false. Clara looked at his patched sleeve, his worn gloves, the mule, the feed sack with scarcely anything inside. "You are asking me to marry you?" "No," Eli said, then paused. "Not today. Not like this. I'm asking you to stay through Christmas. Work if you want wages. Rest if you need rest. Leave after if you still wish to. I'll take you to the train myself." The westbound engine appeared beyond the bend, dragging smoke through the white air. The crowd murmured. Clara looked at the train, then at Eli Mercer, a poor cowboy rancher with no fine horse, no smooth manners, no promise, except one chance. Her ticket trembled. For months she had waited for someone to say she was worth more than what Henry owed. Now the words had come from the poorest man in town, and because hurt had made her cautious, she did not trust them. Clara did not take Eli Mercer's hand. She walked past him and climbed onto the train platform. as the engine groaned to a stop, iron wheels shrieking against frozen rails. Steam billowed around her like smoke from a house fire. Men hauled sacks. A mother pulled two children close. The conductor stepped down with a lantern in one hand and impatience in the other. "Ticket, ma'am." Clara held it out. Eli remained near the depot steps, hat in hand, snow gathering on his shoulders. Mr. Dobbins watched with a satisfied smile. "Best let her go, Mercer. Some women carry trouble like perfume." The conductor punched Clara's ticket. The small click sounded final. She put one foot on the train step. Behind her, Eli said, "Dobbins, take down that notice." The crowd shifted. Clara froze. Mr. Dobbins turned slowly. "What did you say?" I said. "Take it down." "And who will make me?" Eli did not raise his voice. "I owe you $9.40 for last spring's seed. I know what a debt is. You bring it to a man's door. You don't nail it up beside a Christmas wreath so children can laugh at a widow." Mr. Dobbins' face darkened. "That widow owes me $43. Clara turned. "I do not," Dobbins pointed at her. "Your husband did. My husband is dead. Dead don't die just because a man does." Eli stepped up onto the platform. "My bay not, but decency sure can." A murmur passed through the crowd. Eli was not known for sharp words. He was known for mending fences, lowering his head, and paying late when the calf crop failed. Hearing him speak against Dobbins was like seeing a church pew stand up and walk. Dobbins pulled the peppermint stick from his mouth. "Careful, Mercer. You have an account too." "I know. You want me calling it due?" "No." "Then keep your poor mouth shut." Something flickered in Eli's eyes. Clara expected anger. Instead, she saw fear. Real fear. The kind a man carried when his pantry was thin and winter had teeth. He looked at the notice again. Then he walked to the depot wall, ripped the paper, and tore it down. The sound cracked through the snowy air. Dobbins lunged, but two men caught him more from surprise than loyalty. Eli folded the notice once and held it out to Clara. "This belongs to you." Clara looked at the torn paper. She did not take it. "You had no right," she said. His face fell. The crowd went silent again, but this silence was different. It leaned forward. Clara stepped down from the train step, anger rising because anger was easier than weeping. "You think I wanted another man making a scene over me? You think I wanted the whole town watching you play hero with my shame?" Otis' hand lowered. "I was leaving," she said. "That was the one thing still mine." The conductor called, "All aboard." Eli nodded once, as if she had struck him, and he accepted the blow. "You're right." That quiet answer made her angrier. He looked at the conductor. "Can she still ride?" "Tickets punched," the conductor said. "She can ride or waste it. I don't care which, but I'm leaving." Eli turned back to Clara. "I'm sorry. I should have asked before touching that notice." Mr. Dobbins shook free from the men holding him. "You will pay for that, Mercer." "So, I expect so," Eli said. The train bell rang. Clara looked at the open door. Warm lamplight shone inside the passenger car. Beyond it waited motion, distance, and the chance to be unknown. Unknown sounded better than unwanted, but the torn notice in Alice's hand changed something. Not enough to trust him. Enough to make leaving feel less like courage and more like surrender. The conductor climbed aboard. "Ma'am." Clara took one step toward the train. Then a small sound came from the street, a child's cough. She turned. A boy stood beside Ali's mule, wrapped in a coat too large for him, his face pale beneath a wool cap. He could not have been more than 6. His eyes were fixed on Clara's valise, not curious, afraid, as if he had seen women leave before and knew leaving had a sound. Eli followed her gaze. Pain crossed his face. "Samuel, I told you to wait in the wagon." The boy said nothing. Snow clung to his lashes. Clara had heard about Samuel Mercer. His mother, Ruth, died of fever 2 winters back. Afterward, people said the boy stopped talking. Some said he was simple. Some said grief had locked his words away. Clara knew what it was to have people talk about your silence as if it belonged to them. The train lurched. Last call, the conductor shouted. Clara looked at the boy, then at Eli, then at the train. Her hand closed around the valise handle. I will stay until the day after Christmas, she said. Eli blinked. You don't have to. I know what I do not have to do, Mr. Mercer. He shut his mouth. I will work for wages, she continued. Such air, I will sleep behind a locked door. I will not be discussed as a wife, a mother, a charity case, or a blessing sent by Providence. If you cannot agree, I will get on that train. Eli nodded. Agreed. I mean it. I heard you. The train pulled away with a groan, gathering speed along the white track. Clara watched it leave with her punch ticket useless in her pocket. For a moment, grief opened beneath her ribs so wide she could hardly breathe. Then Samuel Mercer coughed again. She looked down at his bare hands. Where are his gloves? She asked. Eli looked ashamed for the second time that afternoon. Lost one. Other had holes. Clara opened her valise, took out her remaining mitten, and held it toward the boy. Samuel stared at it. It is not charity, Clara said softly. It is only warmer than your hand. The boy took it. Eli looked away, blinking hard. That was his first act of help. Clumsy, public, and almost ruined by pride. Hers was quieter. She stayed. Eli Mercer's ranch at 6 miles northeast of Mercy Crossing, where the prairie rose into low hills, and the wind came down hard enough to make a person bow without meaning to. The house was smaller than Clara expected. 2 rooms below, a loft above, and a kitchen built onto the back with mismatched boards. A barn leaned nearby, brave but tired. The corral fence had been patched with rope, barrel stays, and what looked like a broken bed frame. Smoke curled from the chimney, thin but steady. Eli helped Clara down from the wagon without touching more than her elbow. That restraint told her something. Men who wanted to own a woman grabbed. Men who wanted to be praised hovered. Eli simply made the ground safer and stepped back. Inside, the house smelled of wood smoke, beans, and old grief. A woman's blue shawl hung on a peg near the door. Clara noticed it before anything else. The shawl had been brushed clean, folded at one corner, and left where a hand might reach for it. Eli saw her looking. Samuel likes it there. Clara nodded. Samuel went to the hearth and sat on a 3-legged stool. He still wore Clara's mitten on one hand. The kitchen table had 2 plates, one cracked. A small pine branch stood in a jar with a strip of red cloth tied around it for Christmas. Beneath it lay a carved horse with one missing leg. Eli set her valise near the wall. You can have the loft. There's a latch on the inside. I'll sleep in the barn. You will freeze. Not the first time. I will not take your bed and send you to the animals. He looked uncertain. Then I'll sleep by the hearth. Clara studied him. Where does Samuel sleep? In the loft. Then I will sleep in the kitchen. Samuel should keep what is familiar. Eli opened his mouth, then closed it. Perhaps he was beginning to understand that helping her did not mean deciding for her. The kitchen gets cold near dawn, he said. So do train platforms. That almost made him smile. He showed her the flour barrel, the water bucket, the wood stack, and the small pantry. There were potatoes, beans, salt pork, a little molasses, and half a sack of cornmeal. No coffee, no sugar, no butter. On the shelf stood 3 jars of peaches, cloudy with age, likely saved for Christmas until hardship made saving them foolish and pride made opening them impossible. Clara rolled up her sleeves. Eli looked alarmed. You don't have to start tonight. I agreed to work for wages. Supper is work. You came off a hard day. So did you. He nodded and backed away. That evening, Clara made cornmeal dumplings with beans and fried the last strip of salt pork crisp enough to flavor the pot. Samuel watched every movement as if she were performing a magic trick. When she set a bowl in front of him, he looked to his father first. Eli said, "Tang Missy Whitcomb." Samuel's lips pressed together. Clara stirred her own bowl. "He can thank me when he is ready." Eli's expression softened. After supper, the wind rose and shook the walls. Eli mended a harness by lamplight. Clara washed dishes in a tin basin. Samuel sat near the hearth, turning the one-legged horse in his hands. The silence was not comfortable, but it was honest. Clara had lived in houses where silence meant danger. Henry's silence before anger, Dobbin's silence before accusation, churchwomen's silence before judgment. At the Mercer Ranch, silence meant three tired people did not yet know how to speak. The next morning was Christmas. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of Eli chopping wood. Through the small window, she saw him in the blue-gray light, swinging an axe with steady, economical movements. His breath rose white. His boots were cracked. Every few swings, he paused and flexed his right hand as if it hurt. She found a needle and thread in her valise and mended Samuel's spare shirt before anyone came in. When Eli returned, he saw the shirt folded on the table. "You didn't have to, no, Cha. I chose to." He seemed to think about that difference. For breakfast, she made mush with a spoonful of molasses. Eli brought in the pine branch from the jar and set it properly on the table, sheepish as a boy. "Samuel and I usually read the Christmas story," he said. "If that does not trouble you." It does not. His Bible was worn soft at the edges. He read slowly, stumbling once over a name, then starting again without apology. Samuel leaned against his knee. Clara listened. When Eli reached the part about no room at the inn, her throat tightened. She looked at the poor little branch, the cracked plate, the quiet child, and the man who had torn shame from a depot wall, even though he could not afford the consequences. No room at the inn had always sounded like an old sorrow. That morning, it sounded like a question. After the reading, Eli cleared his throat. "I have wages." He placed 3 silver coins on the table. Clara looked at them. "For one supper and one mended shirt? For staying? That is not wages. That is guilt." His ears reddened. "It is all I have." "I did not say it was not enough. I said, name it properly." He sat back chastened. "Then, 1 coin for supper, 1 for mending, 1 held until tomorrow, if you still choose to work." Clara took 2 coins and left the third. "Fair," she said. A small sound came from Samuel. Not a word. More like a breath surprised into shape. Both adults looked at him, and the boy dropped his gaze. Clara pretended not to notice. Some miracles ran from attention. By noon, a storm began pressing over the hills. Eli went to check the cattle. Clara found Samuel trying to tie rags around the one-legged horse. "May I see?" she asked. He hesitated, then handed it over. The broken leg had been lost completely. Clara took a scrap of kindling, shaved it smaller with Eli's kitchen knife, wrapped it in cloth, and tied it with thread. It was not beautiful, but it stood. Samuel's eyes widened. Clara set the horse on the table. "Most things can stand again, if someone is patient." The boy touched the repaired leg. Behind them, the door opened. Eli stood there with snow on his shoulders, watching his son smile for the first time Clara had ever seen. He looked at Clara then, and gratitude moved across his face so plainly she had to look away. That was how trust began. Not with roses, not with promises, not with a kiss stolen beside a Christmas tree. It began with a torn notice, a locked door respected, 2 coins named honestly, a mended shirt, and a child's wooden horse standing on 4 legs again. The day after Christmas, Clara packed her valise. She did it quietly while Eli was in the barn. and Samuel was feeding the chickens. She folded her black dress, tucked her needle case into the side pocket, and wrapped the 2 silver coins in a handkerchief. Her train ticket was useless now, but she kept it anyway. A woman who had lost too many choices sometimes kept proof that she had once had one. She had agreed to stay until the day after Christmas. No more, no less. Yet, when she tied the twine around the valise, her hands moved slowly. The kitchen had changed in only 2 days. Not greatly. Poverty remained. The floor still needed sweeping no matter how often she swept it. The wind still found the cracks. But bread dough sat rising near the hearth, because Eli had traded a coil of rope for flour. Samuel's shirt hung, mended on the peg. The little pine branch stood straighter in its jar. Clara told herself none of that mattered. Then she heard voices outside. One was Eli's, low, controlled. The other voice made her blood turn cold. Widow Whitcomb inside, Silas Roscott. Clara had not seen him since Henry's funeral. He had been Henry's gambling companion, a broad-shouldered freighter with pale eyes and a laugh like a door hinge. 3 months after the burial, he came to Clara's room behind the wash-house and told her Henry had lost more than money at cards. He said Henry had promised him consideration if debts went unpaid. Clara had barred the door. Silas had laughed and said, widows got lonely by winter. Now he was at the Mercer Ranch. Clara moved to the window. Silas sat on a tall horse, wrapped in a buffalo coat. 2 other men waited behind him. Eli stood in the yard with a pitchfork in one hand. She is not receiving visitors, Eli said. Silas grinned. That what she told you? Clara always did know how to sound proper. Eli did not move. State your business. My business is with her. Then you can state it from there and leave. Silas leaned on his saddle horn. Henry Whitcomb owed me. So I hear he owed half the territory. This debt was personal. Clara's stomach twisted. Silas pulled a folded paper from his coat. Got his mark here. He put up household goods, livestock, and any future wages his widow might earn until the sum is settled. That paper is filth, Eli said. That paper is law if I find the right judge. I says nothing about her person. Silas' grin widened. Not in ink. Eli's hand tightened on the pitchfork. Clara stepped outside before fear could root her to the floor. Mr. Ross, Silas took off his hat with a false courtesy that made her skin crawl. Clara, you look thinner. Mercer not feeding you. Eli turned his head slightly. You do not need to answer him. Clara looked at Eli. His face was rigid, his eyes darker than she had ever seen. Something in him wanted violence. Something stronger held it back. She lifted her chin. What do you want, Silas? What I'm owed. Dobbins says you were fixing to run. Then I hear Mercer carried you off like a Christmas bundle. I came by choice. Did you? Silas looked at Eli. He always liked broken things. Land nobody wants, stock nobody buys. Now a widow nobody claims. The words struck their mark, not only in Clara. Eli flinched. Silas saw it and smiled. You know what folks say, Mercer. Ruth died because you were too poor to fetch the doctor fast enough. Clara looked at Eli. His face went gray. Silas continued, enjoying himself. Man loses a wife like that. My BA, he starts collecting women he can save. Makes him feel taller. Leave, Eli said. The pitchfork trembled. Silas' men shifted in their saddles. Clara stepped between them. No, Eli's eyes snapped to her. Mrs. Whitcomb. No, she repeated. I will not have blood spilled over Henry's wickedness or Silas Rust's lies. Silas laughed. Still sharp, Clara turned on him. I own no livestock. I own no household goods worth taking. My future wages are mine, unless a court says otherwise. If you have a paper, Bring it to Reverend Pike and Judge Mallory in town tomorrow. I will answer it there. Silas' eyes narrowed. That sounds brave for a woman with nowhere to go. Clara's mouth went dry. Eli spoke from behind her. She has somewhere to go. The words were quiet, but they landed with weight. Clara did not turn. Silas looked between them. Is that so? Eli said. Until she chooses otherwise. That mattered. Even in fear, Clara heard it. Not she is mine. Not I will keep her until she chooses otherwise. Silas folded the paper. Tomorrow then. Noon, in front of the church, since Mercy Crossing likes a show. He tipped his hat, turned his horse, and rode away with his men. Only when they disappeared beyond the rise did Eli lower the pitchfork. Clara's knees weakened. She gripped the porch posts. Eli took one step toward her, then stopped. My eye, she nodded. He came close enough to steady her elbow. No more. I am sorry, he said. For Silas, for him, for Dobbins, for the town, for what I said at the depot, for not knowing how to help without making it heavier. Clara looked at him then. Did Ruth die because you were poor? The question was harsh, but truth often had to be handled without lace. Eli's gaze moved to the barn. The doctor was in Mercy Crossing, he said. Storm came early. I had one horse sound enough to ride, and she went lame 2 miles out. I walked the rest. By the time the doctor came, Ruth was already beyond fever and prayer. He swallowed. I have told myself if I had owned a better horse, if I had kept money for medicine, if I had noticed sooner, Samuel would still have a mother. Clara felt something inside her loosen and ache. Henry died drunk in a ditch, she said. I have told people he caught a chill coming home late from work. Eli looked at her. I protected a man who did not protect me, she continued, because I thought a widow was supposed to make grief respectable. The wind moved between them. From the chicken yard, Samuel watched silently, clutching the repair horse. Eli's voice was rough. You do not have to make his sins respectable here. Clara closed her eyes. Those were the words she had needed, long before Christmas Eve. When she opened them, she saw Eli not as a rescuer, not as a poor man begging for help, but as someone wounded enough to understand that shame could live in a house like another person. I was packing, she said. I figured I might still leave. I know. Are you asking me not to? Eli looked at the road where Silas had vanished. I am asking you to stand tomorrow with people who will tell lies about you. If you want me beside you, I will be there. If you want me behind you, I will be there. If you want me nowhere near you, I will hitch the wagon and drive you to the train. Clara studied him. It was not a grand speech. It did not make her safe. It did not solve the debt or silence Silas or fill the pantry. But it gave the choice back. I want you beside me, she said. Eli nodded once. Inside the house, Samuel's small voice startled them both. Stay. The word was cracked from disuse, barely louder than the wind. Clara turned. Samuel stood by the door, eyes wide with fear at his own courage. Eli's face broke. Clara knelt in the snow until she was level with the boy. For tomorrow, she said gently. I will stay for tomorrow. Samuel nodded, holding the horse to his chest. And for the first time since Henry died, Clara wanted tomorrow to come. By noon the next day, Mercy Crossing had gathered in front of the church as if judgment were a holiday entertainment. Snow lay in ridges along the boardwalk. The church bell rope swung stiff in the wind. Horses stamped near the hitching rail. Women stood in clusters, gloved hands tucked into muffs, eyes bright with concern that did not cost them anything. Men pretended they had business nearby. Judge Mallory arrived with his black coat buttoned wrong and his spectacles fogged. Reverend Pike stood beside him, uneasy and pale. Mr. Dobbins came carrying his ledger. Silas Russ leaned against the church fence with the confidence of a man who had frightened many people and expected to frighten more. Clara stepped down from Eli's wagon. A whisper passed through the crowd. She wore the same black dress, but she had mended the elbows with neat dark patches and brushed the hem clean. Her hair was pinned simply. Her face was pale. Her hands did not shake. Eli came around the wagon and stood beside her, not touching her, not leading her. Only there. Samuel sat in the wagon, wrapped in a quilt, watching. Judge Mallory cleared his throat. "We are here to examine claims of debt against Mrs. Clara Whitcomb, widow of Henry Whitcomb." Silas smiled. "And to prevent her from slipping away before honest men are paid." Clara looked at him. "Honest men need not fear examination." Someone murmured approval before remembering not to. Dobbins opened his ledger. "Henry Whitcomb owed me $43.18 for what goods?" the judge asked. "Flour, coffee, tobacco, lamp oil, tools, candy, canned peaches," Clara interrupted. "Henry did not bring home tools. I never saw canned peaches from your store." Dobbins frowned. "A wife benefits from her husband's purchases. A wife also suffers from them," Clara said. "But suffering is not a signature." A few women looked down. Judge Mallory peered at the ledger. "Mrs. Whitcomb, did you sign for any of these?" "No." "Did your husband sign?" Dobbins hesitated. Some. The judge turned the ledger. Pages showed marks, initials, and blank spaces where Dobbins had simply written Henry's name. Eli spoke. "Your Honor, half the entries are after Henry Whitcomb died." The crowd stirred. Dobbins snatched at the ledger, but Judge Mallory held it firm. "That is a serious observation." Eli stepped forward. "I know the date Henry died because I helped dig the graves." Clara looked at him, startled. He had never told her that. Eli kept his eyes on the judge. Ground was frozen. "Took 6 men." Dobbins came by and complained the churchyard was too near his delivery lane. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. Judge Mallory's mouth tightened. "Mr. Dobbins." Dobbins' face reddened. "Bookkeeping error." Clara's heart pounded. The judge marked several lines with a pencil. "These claims are invalid, pending further review." Silas pushed away from the fence. "Mine and store credit." He handed over Henry's mark paper. Judge Mallory read it slowly. His brows drew together. "This document claims Henry Whitcomb pledged property and wages." "That?" Silas sat. "Mrs. Whitcomb's wages." "Yes, his widow." The judge looked over his spectacles. "A dead man cannot pledge wages, not his own." Silas' smile thinned. "Henry made his mark. Henry also appears to have pledged a mule, 2 milk cows, a parlor stove, and a silver watch." "Did he own any of those?" Clara shook her head. "No, Your Honor," Eli said. "Henry owned a colt, a razor, and a bad temper." Silence fell. Clara's breath caught. There it was. The truth said in public. Not as gossip, not as shame, as fact. Silas' pale eyes hardened. "Careful, Mercer." Eli turned to the crowd. "No, I am done being careful while cruelty gets caught." "Business," Dobbins scoffed. "Listen to him. Poor man. Gets one widow in his kitchen and thinks himself a preacher." Eli's face flushed, but he did not back down. "I am poor," he said. "Everyone here knows it. My fences lean, my boots leak. I owe money, but I have never nailed a widow's shame to a depot wall. I have never used a dead man's lies to corner a living woman. And I have never mistaken a woman's hunger for consent." The crowd went utterly still. Clara felt the words move through her like warmth. Silas stepped toward him. "You calling me a liar?" "I am calling you what the paper proves." Silas struck him. It happened fast. A fist to Eli's mouth, a gasp from the women, Samuel crying out from the wagon. Eli stumbled, but did not return the blow. Silas swung again. This time Clara moved. She stepped between them with such sudden fierceness that Silas checked himself. "No more," she said. Silas looked amused. "You defending him now?" Yes, the word rang clear. Clara turned so the whole town could hear. Henry Whitcomb gambled. He drank. He struck me when debts found him. I hid it because I was ashamed of choosing him, ashamed of needing the same town that looked away. But I will not carry his lies another mile. Her voice trembled, then steadied. I owe no man my silence. I owe no man my future. And if I work at the Mercer Ranch, it is because I choose honest wages among people who ask before they take. Eli looked at her as if the world had changed shape. Samuel climbed down from the wagon, dragging the quilt behind him. He ran to Eli and grabbed his hands. "Pa," he whispered. The crowd heard. Eli knelt, blood at the corner of his mouth, and pulled the boy close. Judge Mallory folded Silas' paper. "This document is unenforceable and fraudulent in several claims. Mr. Russ, you will remain in town until I determine whether charges are warranted." Silas' face twisted. He looked at Clara with a hatred that promised trouble. Then he lunged for her arm. Eli rose, but before he could reach them, Reverend Pike stepped forward and brought his cane hard across Silas' wrists. The crack echoed. Silas cursed. Two ranch hands seized him from behind. This time the crowd did not merely watch. A woman named Mrs. Bell, who had once crossed the street to avoid Clara, stepped in front of her and lifted her chin at Silas as if daring him to try again. Mr. Dobbins began backing away. Judge Mallory snapped, "Dobbins, you will bring your full ledger to my office." Dobbins stopped. The public choice had been made, not only by Eli, though his swollen mouth and steady stance proved enough, not only by Clara, though her truth had broken the chain Henry left around her name. Mercy, crossing itself, had been forced to choose between comfort and conscience. For once, conscience won. When it was over, Clara found Eli beside the wagon, pressing a cloth to his lip. "You should have hit him back," she said. "I wanted to. Why didn't you?" He looked at Samuel, who leaned against his side. "My boy was watching." Clara's eyes burned. Eli continued quieter. "And so were you." She reached for the cloth. "My eye." He handed it to her. She cleaned the blood from his mouth with careful fingers while the town pretended not to stare. "You stood beside me," she said. "You stood before me. That was foolish. That was brave." She looked up, and for a moment the cold, the town, the old grief, all seemed to fall back. Eli did not confess love. Clara did not either. But something had been chosen in front of everyone, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. Silas Rusk left Mercy Crossing 2 days later in the back of a freight wagon, guarded by men who no longer laughed at his jokes. Judge Mallory found enough fraud in his papers to send him east for trial. Mr. Dobbins was not jailed, but his ledger was stripped of false charges, and the town learned how many widows, minors, and farm families he had fattened upon with ink. By New Year's, Dobbins' store stood quiet. People discovered they could trade with the mill in Cedar Falls if they joined orders together. It took longer. It cost less. Decency often began as inconvenience. Clara remained at the Mercer Ranch. At first, she told herself it was practical. Eli needed help. Samuel needed steady meals and clean shirts. She needed wages, shelter, and time to decide where courage would take her next. Eli never pressed. Each Saturday, he placed coins on the table and named the work attached to them: laundry, mending, cooking, keeping accounts. Clara wrote each amount in a little notebook and made him sign with a pencil stub, which embarrassed him so badly the first time that Samuel smiled into his sleeve. She did not sleep in the loft. Eli patched the small storage room off the kitchen, fixed a latch, and hung a blanket over the gap beneath the door. It was not elegant. It was hers. That mattered more. Winter deepened. The ranch demanded work from all three of them. Clara learned to crack ice from the water trough with a hammer. Eli learned that she liked coffee strong and hated being told to rest. Samuel learned to speak in small pieces. First single words, then two, Then, one night, while Clara rolled biscuit dough, a whole sentence came out of him like a bird startled from brush. "Mrs. Whitcomb, the rooster stole my string." Eli dropped a firewood log on his own boot. Clara laughed before she could stop herself. Samuel laughed too. Eli sat down hard in a chair, his eyes shining, pretending his boot hurt worse than his heart. In February, the church women came. 3 of them arrived in a sleigh with a basket of preserves and faces arranged for apology. Mrs. Bell did the speaking because she had the courage for it. "We were wrong," she said, standing in Clara's kitchen while Eli and Samuel escaped to the barn. "Not only about the debts, about you. We let Henry's name matter more than your face." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. A month earlier, she might have accepted quickly, because hunger made every kindness feel dangerous to refuse. Now she let the words stand in the room long enough to become real. "Yes," she said. "You did." Mrs. Bell's eyes filled. "I am sorry." The other women echoed it. Clara looked at the basket. Peach preserves, coffee, a small packet of sugar, needful things. "I accept your apology," she said. "I do not yet know what to do with it." Mrs. Bell nodded. "That is fair." It was the first apology Clara had ever received that did not ask her to comfort the person giving it. She kept the coffee. She sent 1 jar of preserves back for the church poor box. When Eli heard, he smiled. "You are a hard woman, Clara Whitcomb." "No," she said. "I am becoming an honest one." His smile faded into something gentler. "That you are." Spring came slowly, with mud first and beauty later. Calves dropped in the north pasture. The repaired fence held through 2 storms. Clara planted beans behind the kitchen and marigolds near the door because Ruth's blue shawl, still on its peg, made her think the house deserved another color. She never moved the shawl. One evening in April, she found Eli standing beneath the porch roof, watching the sunset spread gold across the wet fields. Samuel was asleep inside, one hand resting on his wooden horse. Clara stood beside Eli with a cup of coffee. "You have been quiet," she said. "I am often quiet. Not like this." He rubbed his tongue along a crack in the porch rail. "I got a letter today." Fear moved through her before reason could stop it. "From whom?" "Ruth's sister in Missouri." She heard Samuel was speaking again. "Heard there was a woman here." Clara waited. "She wrote that I ought to marry you quick before gossip spoils your name." Clara's mouth tightened. "Kind advice." "I burned the letter." She looked at him. Eli kept his eyes on the fields. "Not because I have not thought of marrying you. I have. More than is proper. More than I know what to do with." The coffee warmed Clara's hands. "But I will not have another person telling me your life should be settled for my convenience," he said. "Not Ruth's sister. Not the church. Not the town. Not even Samuel, though he loves you plain as sunrise." Clara's breath caught. Eli turned to her then. "I love you, Clara," he said, and the words were simple enough to stand on. "I loved you first when you gave my boy your mitten and expected nothing for it. I loved you more when you told me I had helped badly. I loved you when you stood before Silas and gave the truth back to yourself. But I'm not begging for a wife at a depot now. I am asking, here at home, if you would ever consider building a life with me. Only if it is your choosing." Clara looked toward the barn, the pasture, the kitchen window glowing behind them. Home, the word had crept up quietly. It had hidden itself in flour, dust sign, wages, patched boards, Samuel's voice, Eli's restraint, and the way no one in that house treated her grief like a debt. She thought of the train ticket still tucked in her notebook. "I need to tell you something," she said. Eli nodded. "I was afraid if I stayed, people would say you saved me." His face grew troubled. "I never wanted that." "I know. That is why I stayed." The wind moved soft through the towering grass. Clara set her cup on the porch rail. "You did not save me like a man. pulling a woman from a river. You stood on the bank and told me my feet could find ground. That is different. Eli's eyes shone. She reached for his hand. It was the first time she had done so without necessity. Yes, she said, I will marry you. Not because I am forgotten, not because I am hungry, not because your boy needs a mother, though I love him dearly. I will marry you because I am known here and still free. Eli bowed his head over her hand. He did not kiss her then, not because he lacked feeling, but because reverence sometimes knew how to wait. Their wedding took place in June, beneath a sky washed clean by morning rain. Reverend Pike married them in the churchyard because Clara wanted open air, and no one argued. Samuel stood between them holding both rings. The one was plain silver, and the other had been made by the blacksmith from a polished horseshoe nail. Mrs. Bell wept into a handkerchief. Judge Mallory wore his spectacles crooked. The ranch hands who had held Silas brought wildflowers. Even Dobbins watched from across the street, thinner and smaller somehow, but he did not approach. After the vow, Samuel tugged Clara's sleeve. She bent down. Ma, he whispered. The churchyard stilled. Clara looked at Eli. His face held hope and fear in equal measure, but he said nothing. He left the choice where it belonged. Clara touched Samuel's cheek. If your heart wants that, mine will answer. Samuel wrapped his arms around her neck. That was when Eli finally kissed his bride, gentle and trembling, while the town that had once watched her shame now witnessed her joy. Years later, people in Mercy Crossing would tell the story of the Christmas Eve when Clara Whitcomb nearly boarded the westbound train and poor Eli Mercer came riding in on a mule to beg for one chance. Some made it sound grander than it was. They gave Eli better words. They gave Clara fewer tears. They forgot the notice on the depot wall, the missing mitten, the punch ticket, and the boy who could not speak. But Clara remembered everything. She kept the old train ticket pressed inside the family Bible, not as a sorrow but as proof. Proof that she could have left. Proof that she had chosen to stay. Proof that love, when it was true, did not trap a forgotten woman inside gratitude. It opened the door and let her walk through freely. On winter nights, when snow pressed against the windows and the ranch smelled of bread, coffee, and cedar smoke, Eli would sometimes catch her looking at that ticket. Regret it? He would ask softly. Clara would smile towards Samuel, now chattering by the hearth, and toward the little girl asleep in the cradle Eli had carved by hand. Then she would look at the poor cowboy rancher who had become the richest man she knew, not in money, but in patience, honor, and love. No, she would say, taking his hand. That train was leaving. I was the one who finally came home.